Yeah, my first bombing mission was the Kiel Canal, and that was also for the idea there was to try and block the canal from time to time. In the early days, there wasn't anything that we had big enough that could do it, but the idea used to be that if you could to bomb something or bomb ships or something like that, they would make traps in the canal. Yeah. Then of course that would be a help on keeping stuff from going through it. Huh? But now we covered a high variety of trips. Huh? Oh yes.
And what aircraft were you in for these bombing missions?
Well, first of all, I was on Wellingtons. Yeah, and we did a lot on Wellingtons, and then of course we're on the Lancasters. So we graduated onto Lancasters. So.
And could you please describe the conditions inside a Wellington?
Well, in the Wellington there was rather cramped, but we still considered it a good aircraft. And by that time we had 6 in the crew, and we had crewed up, and we were flying together. But it was just there's no comfort. There's no comfort. Each person had their own little cubbyhole or section. But that was all. But once you got up over 10,000 feet, then of course, then it gets a bit uncomfortable, you know. Yeah, just trying to keep warm was a thing, you know. And of course, you had all sorts of wires for you. You had your air cover, you had your oxygen masks, and all these sort of things, you know. And as I say, it was a lot colder than it was later on in the Lancasters and even the Halifax and Stirlings. So.
And as an observer, what were your duties for the mission?
Well, my duty, we were highly qualified navigators. We were a step above the normal navigators. Yeah, because we did everything. We did the whole job. It was the same thing as at one time. What happened was that every aircraft had 2 pilots. Anyway, there came a time when they took one pilot away, and then it was the observer that was a backup pilot. And after that, when the big 4-engine jobs came out, they brought in the role of flight engineer, and the flight engineer was supposed to be able to fly. But the way I'd seen it right from the very beginning was that I reckoned that I knew enough about flying, and I told people as long as I can take it home and land it, that's good enough for me.
Slight side story. A few weeks ago, I interviewed a man who was a flight engineer for Lancasters, and he said he was taught how to fly the plane, but not how to land it.
No, well, my big thing was I was taught how to land them. Yeah, and I had a good background in flying and piloting it on a lighter aircraft. Yeah. But then, of course, between the Wellingtons and the Lancasters, that we did it quite often. We did it as part of an air. Sometimes you went up to test your engines. So you did that pretty often, or see the rest of the aircraft. And I always took the the opportunity to be able to land the aircraft.
And can you tell me a bit about Halifaxes?
Not a great deal. I did a lot of trips in Halifaxes, but she was also a good aircraft. But I know there's lots of friends of mine who if you have an argument, they say, "Oh, it's far better than the Lancaster," and blah blah blah. But that's only the Halifax was a good aircraft. It couldn't fly as high as the Lancaster, and it wasn't as fast as the Lancaster. But that was just about it.
And what's your take on Halifax versus Lancaster?
Oh, to me, it was the Lancaster.
And was the interior of a Lancaster different from a Halifax?
Not much the same. Not much the same. It's just skin. Just the skin, you know. Everything was for bomb loads.
And you mentioned something about Stirlings earlier.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that?
Well, the Stirling she was the first of the heavies, and she was quite slow, and didn't have a high ceiling rate, you know, but she did a good job in her day. You know? Oh yes, there was many a crew did great work in Stirlings.
There's a D-Day veteran I spoke to a couple of years ago. His glider for D-Day was towed by a Stirling.
Oh, yes. Oh, there was a lot of that. Halifaxes and Stirlings did a lot of glider towing, yeah. Oh, yes.
This is going to probably be an odd question, but what was your least favourite aircraft to fly in?
A Bolingbroke. The Bolingbroke was the Canadian-American version of the Blenheim. She was underpowered, and if you lost one engine, you had trouble trying to make it back to your base. But in Canada, a lot of chaps were lost over the lakes in the winter time. When they lost one engine, they went down through the ice. Well, that was my one, the Bolingbroke. But as I say, I flew them, and we were all right.
And what was your favourite aircraft?
Well, I started off, I had a love for the Wellington, but of course, later on it was the Lancaster. But the old Lizzie, she never let us down. Well, Lizzie was the Lysander. But the other thing, there's one that's hardly ever mentioned, that was the Anson. And of course, the amount of trainees that was through on Lysanders was amazing. Everybody praised the Anson.
And what did you think of the German aircraft of the war?
Oh, very good, excellent. Oh, excellent. As a matter of fact, at the end of the war, there was one German one, you know, and I thought at first it was a shooting star, you know, and it wasn't. It was a jet, and it flew past me just as if it was a shooting star. When I went back to report on this, they said, it probably was a shooting star you saw. I said, no. This was an airplane. That was one of the earliest ones that we'd spotted, because, you know, you got debriefed after every trip.
Was there ever any occasions where you had to turn back from the target because of bad weather?
No, we were all right. No, we never turned back. Our ground crew were every bit as good as our air crew. They kept our aircraft in excellent condition. We never had any complaints about our ground crew.
And can you explain to me how the briefings worked for the missions?
Right. Well, what happened was that when you landed, you're taken from the aircraft back into wing on it was trucks. We used to call them crew trucks. So in other words, you didn't split up. You're taken in the crew truck, and there you're interrogated as to how the trip went. And of course, you had your version of what went on, and then of course your cameras that you had in your aircraft also had their versions, and we always seemed to marry up into it was exactly the same. Now we had an excellent crew. We had 2 New Zealanders, 2 Scotsmen, 2 Englishmen, and 1 Londoner.
And what about the briefings that you had before you went on a mission?
Well, the briefing was what happened. You assembled. Now, first of all, you had an all-in briefing where every member of the air crew was there. And then after that briefing was done, and that was more or less told you where you're going and etc. etc. And you split off into different sections. The gunners was going to see about their guns and talk to their gunnery officers, and the flight engineers they would see about the air officers. The air observers and navigators were going together, and the pilots and the observers were together. Yeah? That's how it went, because we had to make sure that we were exactly correct at all times between the pilot and the observer, the pilot and the navigator. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And were you sitting in the cockpit during the mission?
Yeah.
Could you actually see anything below you during the mission?
From time to time you could, yes. From time to time you could, yes.
What sort of things could you see?
It all depends. The more water about the place was, the better it was. Better reflections and things like that.
And could you see what the pathfinders had left?
Oh yes, it all depends. That was it, to be able to recognise and make sure that you were taking the right targets, because the Germans were quite sophisticated, because they could try and imitate your pathfinders. TIs what they put down. No.
And were you involved in raids on other cities like Hamburg?
Oh yes.
What do you remember from those missions?
Well, a lot of them. Well, the big one in Hamburg was a big fire raiser, but that happened to be that the wind conditions, everything was just right or wrong, or depends which way you're looking at it. As far as we were concerned, it was right. As far as the Germans were, it was a big disaster. Because at that time, a lot of the buildings in Hamburg were wooden.
And were you surprised when you heard how successful the raid had been?
Not surprised, because that's what we went for. The more successful it was, the better the raid was. Well, there was several big ones, but the last big one was Potsdam. That was a real big one, huh? As a matter of fact, that one was on the 14th of April. So that was one of those big ones, you know. And that was a night one. And there was another one was on the 13th of April. Was another time we went to Kiel. And what had happened was that the night before we went to Kiel, and we put this battleship, and we sunk it, we turned it over. And then it came back that they wanted us to go back again. And one of the retorts was that night from one of the crews was, "Are you sure you don't want us to put it back up again?" But no, that was it. And that actually blocked the canal. That actually blocked the canal, you know. Because then, of course, one of the last of the big ones that we did was to Bremen on the 22nd of April. You know? Yeah. And of course, there was places like Merseburg and various other ones like that, yeah. But this is something that I keep to myself, you know, because I've got the way I look at it is that it's not a thing we brag about. You know? It's it was wartime, and that was it. And today I've got many friends across Europe and across Africa that and they come from all sorts of walks of life and all different countries.
And just in raids in Germany in general, how much anti-aircraft fire was there?
Oh, plenty. As a matter of fact, what a lot of people don't realise was the amount of German troops and specialised German troops that had to be contained within Germany because of what the Bomber Command was doing. You know, as a matter of fact, that was it was surprising. There must have been thousands had to be retained in Germany who could have been going somewhere else, and they were all very highly trained people.
And did you ever encounter night fighters?
Oh yes, a couple of times, but we were quite lucky. We managed to corkscrew away, but the night fighters, what you had to watch even more carefully than over a target area or a way back was just before you landed, because there used to be quite a few of them who used to prowl round about aerodromes and airfields in this country and waiting for people to come in, because that's when you're most vulnerable, when everything was shut down. And there's quite a number of people got shot down just before they landed.
And could you please tell me how this corkscrew evasive manoeuvre worked?
Oh, that's it was just like a corkscrew. When you're flying, you might have been flying more or less level or up and down a bit, and then the corkscrew was like that. That was a corkscrew. Huh? They get away, huh?
Did anyone in the crew ever get sick when that happened?
Oh yeah, what was it? My mid-upper gunner used to get sick as soon as he put his foot inside the aircraft. Once we're still once we're still takeoff, he was all right.
And did you ever, during the, did you ever find out whether you'd hit the targets during the raids?
I know we did. As I say, one of my specialties was bombing.
But could you see photographs of it later?
Oh yes, yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
And was your aircraft ever damaged by anti-aircraft
Oh,
fire?
we had been, but we had nothing really serious. You know, we had holes all over the place from time to time, but some very close to the occupants with, but no, we always managed to get back.
And were you ever given? Did you get new bombs as the war went on?
Oh yes, we dropped just about everything that was going. Yeah. Oh yes.
Did you ever? I don't know if you've heard of it. Did you ever get any of the massive bombs that Barnes-Wallis had developed?
Oh, the different ones. Yes, we did. When we went on a couple of trips to Bordeaux and things like that. Yes. But I know for a fact that even Barnes-Wallis's bombs, the big ones that were dropping in there, the Germans' fortification of the submarine pens was terrific. I know that even today, you can have a walk through them, you can see what it's like. Oh yes, but there is what I say, is that there's what happens is what the amount of German personnel that had to be employed because of the bomber command raids was tremendous. It was tremendous. It wasn't just one or two round a village or something like that. No, the number of people that they kept back within Germany itself was properly, it must have been millions.
And did you or anyone else in the crew have a special name for your own aircraft?
Yes. Well, we called our one after Loch Ness Monster. That was it. Huh? It was a favourite of ours, especially two Scotsmen was there, and we adopted the rest of them.
And when you were on missions, could you, or rather night missions, were there other British planes flying near you?
Well, all depends on what type of mission you're on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're in a stream, well, at the beginning, the squadron took off, but you had a rendezvous point. A lot of rendezvous points were like Beachy Head, and they used to assemble in that area, and then they took off. And of course, the thing about that was that the Germans also knew that we were assembling from different places, and they could actually send out the night fighters if they did, Well, but there was umpteen different places, and they couldn't guard them all, because quite often there was more than one raid on in one night, the same night, and that was deviations to keep away from maybe the real big one of that occasion.
And how many times a week would you go on a mission?
Well, sometimes night after night, about three nights in 1 week. sometimes according to the weather, maybe about 8 days, maybe a week. But the weather has a lot to do with it.
And were you ever escorted by fighters?
We were escorted because we did quite a few daytime raids. Yes, we were. But we were quite happy with that. We used to see them. We used to see them on the verges of the streams.
And do you remember what kind of fighters they were?
Well, the ones that we saw was Mustangs. All depends on how far in you're going. If you're going a long way in, there was a Mustang. Sometimes it was Hurricanes, sometimes it was Spitfires. But they were only used in short flights. Whereas the Mustang was built for long range.
And was it cold aboard the planes?
Oh, it was never pleasant. At one time, everybody used to have a Nevern suit. It was like a fur jacket and things like that. But once we got into the heavies, they took all that stuff away from us. Then we didn't need it. Well, that was all right for these people. They weren't flying.
And did you ever carry food with you aboard the plane?
Ever carry?
Food with you?
No. All I used to carry was five barley sugars, sweets.
And what kind of entertainment did you have back at the airfields?
Well, all depends on what. If it was one of the pre-war stations, there was generally a building that was used for dances, things like that, and concerts. If it was the wartime ones, then sometimes all you did was make sure there was an empty hangar, and you had something in there. But that was how it was done.
When you were sat in the cockpit, what kind of equipment did you have in front of you?
I know the latest navigational equipment that we could use. We had G, we had Oboe, we had all sorts of different ones there.
And how did G work?
Well, G was in two beams, and where these two beams cross, that's where you were. It's as simple as that.
And did that improve navigation?
Oh yes. Well, the H2S was a different story entirely. The H2S was you were beaming down, and the more water it was around, the clearer it became. But the only trouble with that was the German fighters used to vector onto what we were projecting. So sometimes they could become a hazard.
And how many occasions do you think you deployed window?
Well, quite a number. Even when we were doing training operations, we were dropping window, which but never counted. It didn't count as operations as such, but we were dropping window many a time, or during training flights.
And when bombs were dropped from an aircraft, did the plane become noticeably lighter?
Oh, okay, but you rose. You rose slightly, yes. All depends on how much stuff you're actually carrying or dropping.
And can you please explain what the procedure would be in terms of what the crew would do and each crew member would do and say when you got over the target?
Well, each person had their own to do. You start with the pilot. He was taking instructions from whoever was doing the the lead on to the target. So, sometimes we did that. Myself, quite a number of times, of course, and sometimes it was the wireless operator. Sometimes it was our other. We had a radar operator as well. I used to use that over the targets, because I say we were still special duties. Of course, your gunners were always on alert, and as I say, your engineer, he had to be very careful then, making sure that everything was all right on his side. No? But everybody was active.
Were there any times on a mission where you could more or less relax?
No. If you relax, I was wrong. As many a time, what happened with us was that, and I've said this before, we never really relaxed until we were home.
And what was the most feared German night fighter?
The Junkers 88, because she had a cannon on her, and they actually fitted onto her guns that would fire upwards and try and get underneath the bellies of the Lancasters. And that's where we lost quite a number of Lancasters. These are firing guns from the Ju-88s.
Were some missions a lot more dangerous than others, or were they more or less the same?
Well, what we used to do, we used to classify every mission as dangerous. Because if you didn't and you drop your guard, that was when you would have been in trouble. I don't say they weren't, but we never allowed them to be.
Were there ever any times where your missions were just taking photographs of areas?
Oh yes, we had that from time to time. Yes.
Could you tell me about any of those?
Well, they were done for 138 Squadron, and that was, the idea behind that was sometimes it was targets that they had been bombed, and sometimes there might have been targets that we flew past. They passed them as if we're going somewhere else, and you might have been taking them then. But we got a lot of practice in that, because that's another story I can give you.
Were there ever any occasions where you could, where you actually flew over neutral territory and could see the cities all illuminated?
There was one night we were coming back from a trip, and the next thing I saw was these lights. I went, what the hell's going on? And what had happened was that we were almost into Dublin, and what that was the wind speed was ferocious, and what we thought we'd found out was that we were nothing near the wind speed, what the actual wind speed was. And of course, as soon as we saw that, we turned around and we went back. But that's what, the nearest I've been to being on neutral territory. Oh.
Mm-hmm. How was morale in Bomber Command throughout the war, would you say?
Good. It was good. It was excellent.
Why do you think it stayed so high despite the losses?
It was a camaraderie of sticking together. Oh yes. You're all volunteers. You're still volunteer.
So just going back to the crew that you were good friends with,
Mm.
did they talk much about their lives before they joined the Air Force?
Yeah, we all had that, but yeah, the pilot is a sheep farmer in New Zealand. A radar man was an accountant in New Zealand. A wireless operator, his father had a joinery business across in Weems Bay, across the water from where I come from. The rear gunner was a surveyor for the borough just down the water here, and the mid-upper gunner, his family got a hotel in Canterbury in Kent. And that's quite strange, was that I got married on a Friday night in Scotland, and we had another party at the Fleur de Lis Hotel in Canterbury on a Wednesday following, because the crew was all going home to New Zealand and places like that.